early July 1911, Bingham begins the trip that I think we can count safely as one of the greatest runs in exploration, at least in 20th century. They leave from Cusco. They go over the mountains down into the Sacred Valley where many Inca emperors had had their most beautiful estates. They proceed down the road that had only been recently blasted along the Urubamba River. What had once been the straight river of the Vilcanota, at a certain point, it becomes this twisting, turning, violent thing that was very hard to get along until a few decades before Bingham. On July 23rd, they get to a bend in the river called Mandorpampa. And at Mandorpampa, Bingham had told to ask the local innkeeper about ruins in the area. And the innkeeper, whose name was Melchor Arteaga, just pointed straight up and said the words that would change Bingham's life, Machu Picchu. July 24th began very rainy. Bingham waited for the rain to stop before getting Melchor Arteaga out of bed, who was apparently nursing a hangover. But he was still better at walking across the bridge than Bingham was. He could sort of took his boots off and just sort of sprinted across the Urubamba River. Bingham, however, had to get down on hands and knees, and it's understandable. He was 6'4". His center of gravity is much, much higher. He was very afraid of falling into the water and ending our story right now rather than in half an hour. And they were followed by a Peruvian sergeant named Carrasco. And they began their climb up the side of the mountain through gorgeous orchids. It was incredibly green, still wet. Arteaga told Bingham to watch out where he put his hands. There were a lot of vipers on the slopes. And after about an hour and a half, they get to a clear ridge where Bingham is very surprised to find a family of Indian farmers living at the site. On the left is a member of Bingham's expedition. This was the Richarte family. Torvis Richarte on the right, and his wife, whose name, unfortunately, Bingham didn't record. And they had been living at the site for at least 4 years. And they had made this ridge their home. It was a place away from the government. They were a little bit nervous to see the Peruvian military there. They were afraid that Torvis was going to be conscripted into the army. But Arteaga reassured them and said, no, this gringo just wants to see the ruins. And they were like, okay. So while they talk with Arteaga, they send their son, whose name has been called sometimes Pablito Richarte, who was about 5 or 6 years old at the time, to lead Bingham through, past their house, over the ancient terraces and into what would be the site itself. Bingham follows the boy. He has a hard time keeping up, but they come around one turn in a terrace, and there it is before him, Machu Picchu. All things related to the ruins itself, sometimes it's best to defer to his writing on the place. When he first saw it, it captured his imagination as a jungle-covered maze of small and large walls, the ruins of buildings made of blocks of white granite, most carefully cut and beautifully fitted together without cement. Surprise followed surprise until there came the realization that we were in the midst of as wonderful ruins as any ever found in Peru. The boy led him up past the fountains to what Bingham came to call the Sacred Plaza. There was one temple there with this is a whole rock right here that had been carved and erected on its side, weighing several tons. And another temple that came to be called the Temple of the Three Windows. Those windows, if you looked out to it, faced the rising sun and the mountains below. And really, I think when you see them, it really feels like you're being pulled out of them into some other world. And then ultimately, the Intihuatana of the site. The Intihuatana has been translated as the hitching post for the sun. It was an altar of sorts and a way to mark the passage of time, not of hours, but of equinoxes and solstices. And this was the only one that we know of in such a wonderful condition that survived the Spanish conquest. Most of the time, when the Spanish found them, they would knock the top off because they would see it as an idol that was very clearly worshipped. And this is the only one that we know of. And when Bingham saw these things, he knew very quickly that it was something special. He was also aware that many other people had been to the site before him. The Temple of the Three Windows actually had people's names on it. People in Cusco and in the area had talked about ruins in Machu Picchu for years. There's even been work by others in the last few years about foreigners from the region who perhaps marked Machu Picchu on their mining prospectuses. Bingham, however, in taking these pictures, brought Machu Picchu into a new century, a different stage in its life story, in which would come to stand for the development of the Incas before the Spanish conquest. Thank you very much.